Final transmission from Admiral Zexthera of the Hegemony Fleet, moments before Earth's counterattack began. What happens when the galaxy's most advanced military alliance decides that humanity, these strange bipedal creatures from a backwater planet, poses a threat to galactic order? What occurs when beings who have never known true adversity encounter a species forged in the crucible of the galaxy's most hostile world? The galactic hegemony learned the hard way that there's a difference between being advanced and being dangerous. They discovered that humans don't just fight wars, they become war itself. This is the story of how the galaxy's greatest military power learned to fear the children of Earth. This is the story of what happens when you go to war with humans and encounter the horrors forged on a Deathworld. Admiral Kethmore of the Galactic Hegemony stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, watching the blue marble that these primitive beings called Earth slowly rotate below. The planet looked deceptively peaceful from orbit, its white clouds swirling lazily across blue oceans and brown continents. Nothing about it suggested the horrors that would soon be unleashed upon his fleet. "Initial scans complete, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, Commander Yalera. Her forearms moved gracefully across her control panel, each motion precise and calculated. The planet shows significant electromagnetic activity consistent with early industrial civilization. Population estimates suggest approximately 8 billion sentient life forms. Kethmore's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered a smile. 8 billion primitives against the might of the hegemony's third fleet. It would hardly be called a war, more like pest control on a planetary scale. "Any signs of spacefaring capability?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The hegemony's intelligence networks were thorough. These humans had barely managed to place a few crude satellites in orbit around their world. "Minimal, sir. They've achieved limited orbital presence with primitive chemical propulsion systems. No evidence of faster-than-light capabilities or energy-based weaponry. Their most advanced military technology appears to be kinetic projectile weapons and crude explosive devices." Kethmore turned away from the viewing screen, his 6 legs carrying him toward the command chair with fluid grace. The hegemony had been expanding across the galaxy for over 3,000 years, bringing order and civilization to countless worlds. Sometimes the primitive species submitted peacefully. Sometimes they required persuasion. The humans would fall into the latter category. "Communications," he commanded. "Open a channel to the planet's surface. All major population centers." The communications officer, a crystalline being whose body chimed softly as she worked, nodded. "Channel open, Admiral. Broadcasting on all frequencies they appear to utilize." Kethmore straightened, assuming the formal posture required for first contact protocols. He had delivered this speech to dozens of primitive worlds. The words came as naturally as breathing. Primitive inhabitants of the third planet in this system, his voice boomed across Earth's airwaves, translated into hundreds of human languages by the ship's advanced linguistic processors. "I am Admiral Kethmore of the Galactic Hegemony. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our growing empire. You will cease all military activities and prepare for occupation. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. You have 72 of your planetary rotations to comply." The transmission ended, and Kethmore settled into his command chair. Now came the waiting period, time for the primitives to panic, argue among themselves, and eventually realize the futility of resistance. He had seen it countless times before. "Admiral," called his sensor operator, "we're detecting unusual activity on the planet's surface." "Define unusual," Kethmore replied, though he wasn't particularly concerned. Primitives often ran about like frightened prey animals when confronted with superior technology. Massive troop movements across all major land masses. Evacuation of civilian populations from urban areas to rural regions. Their primitive communication networks are operating at maximum capacity. The sensor operator paused, his translator struggling with an unfamiliar concept. "Sir, they appear to be mobilizing." Kethmore's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Mobilizing? With what? Their metal projectile throwers and chemical explosives?" He waved a dismissive appendage. "Let them play soldier. It will make the demonstration of our superiority more educational for any survivors." What Admiral Kethmore didn't understand, what none of the hegemony truly comprehended, was that he had just declared war on a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history at war. Not just with each other, but with their planet itself. On Earth's surface, in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sarah Mitchell stood before a wall of screens showing military movements across the globe. At 62, she had spent 4 decades in the United States military, fighting in conflicts across 3 continents. She thought she had seen every type of warfare imaginable. She was wrong. "Ma'am," called Colonel Rodriguez from his station. "NATO command confirms full mobilization. The Chinese and Russians are moving their forces to defensive positions. Even the smaller nations are calling up their reserves." Mitchell nodded grimly. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth was preparing to fight the same enemy. Ancient grudges and territorial disputes had been set aside in the face of an external threat. Humanity was finally united in the face of annihilation. "What about the civilians?" she asked. "Evacuation proceeding according to plan. Underground facilities are at 60% capacity and rising. The subway systems in major cities have been converted to shelter networks. We've got people moving supplies to rural areas around the clock." Mitchell turned to another officer. "Status on special projects?" "Project Lazarus is green across the board. The enhancement facilities are running at maximum capacity. We've got volunteers lined up for blocks in every major city." The officer's voice carried a mixture of pride and horror. "Ma'am, some of these people, they're saying goodbye to their families like they don't expect to come back as the same people." "They won't," Mitchell said quietly. "None of us will. But that's what it takes to fight something like this." She moved to a secure terminal and entered her authorization codes. Across the planet, similar codes were being entered by military leaders in Moscow, Beijing, London, and dozens of other capitals. Humanity was about to reveal why evolution on a Deathworld produced a very different kind of species than the rest of the galaxy was used to encountering. In orbit above, Admiral Kethmore was reviewing casualty projections when his tactical officer approached with what appeared to be confusion written across her alien features. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures from the planet's surface that don't match our intelligence reports." "What kind of energy signatures?" "Unknown, sir. The readings are inconsistent with their supposed technological level. And, Admiral, there's something else. Our deep-range sensors are picking up movement in the asteroid belt beyond this system." Kethmore's attention sharpened. "Movement? Define movement." "Objects accelerating on intercept courses with this system." "Multiple objects. Large objects." The tactical officer's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Sir, the energy signatures suggest active propulsion systems, but, according to our intelligence, these beings barely have chemical rockets." For the first time since entering the system, Admiral Kethmore felt something that might have been concern. He had conquered 47 worlds for the hegemony. He had never encountered a primitive species that possessed hidden spacecraft. "Time to intercept?" "Approximately 48 hours, sir." Kethmore considered his options. The hegemony's third fleet consisted of 200 vessels, including 15 dreadnoughts and the flagship. Whatever the humans had hidden in their asteroid belt, it couldn't possibly pose a threat to such overwhelming firepower. "Maintain current position," he ordered. "When their hidden ships arrive, we'll destroy them along with their world." It will serve as an excellent demonstration to any other primitive species considering resistance. On Earth, General Mitchell received the final confirmation she had been waiting for. Project Lazarus was complete. The enhancement facilities had finished their work. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, it was their ability to adapt, to change, to become whatever they needed to become to survive. "Ma'am," Colonel Rodriguez said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "the first enhanced units are reporting ready for deployment." Mitchell looked at the tactical display showing the alien fleet in orbit. She thought about the children being evacuated to underground bunkers, about the families saying goodbye to loved ones who were volunteering for enhancement procedures that would fundamentally alter their humanity. She thought about a species that had never known real war about to encounter a species that had never known real peace. "Signal all commands," she said. "Phase 1 is authorized. It's time to show our visitors what humans become when you threaten their home." Above them, Admiral Kethmore watched the peaceful blue world below and felt satisfied with his tactical position. He commanded the most powerful fleet in known space, facing primitives with chemical rockets and metal projectile weapons. What could possibly go wrong? In less than 48 hours, he would discover that the deadliest predators in the galaxy weren't the ones with the biggest teeth or the most advanced weapons. They were the ones that learned to hunt together, to sacrifice for their pack, and to become monsters when their families were threatened. The galactic hegemony was about to learn why Earth was classified as a Deathworld, and why the species that survived on Deathworlds were very, very different from everything else in the galaxy. 47 hours after Admiral Kethmore's ultimatum, the objects from the asteroid belt finally came into clear sensor range. What the hegemony scanners revealed defied every assumption they had made about human technology. Admiral, Commander Yalera's voice carried a note of disbelief. The approaching vessels, they're not using chemical propulsion. Kethmore moved to the sensor station, his 6 legs carrying him with sudden urgency. The display showed 17 objects, each roughly half the size of a hegemony destroyer, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for a species that barely managed chemical rockets. Analysis, he demanded. The propulsion system appears to be some form of controlled fusion drive, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. More concerning, Admiral, these vessels are not emitting the standard electromagnetic signatures we'd expect from metal hulls. The tactical display zoomed in on the lead vessel, and Kethmore felt his mandibles lock in shock. The ship wasn't built, it appeared to have been grown. Its hull was organic, black as space itself, with a surface that seemed to absorb sensor beams rather than reflect them. "Sir," the communications officer's crystalline body chimed urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel." On screen. The viewing screen shimmered, and Admiral Kethmore found himself staring at something that had once been human. The creature that looked back at him stood easily 8 feet tall, its body a fusion of organic tissue and integrated technology. Its eyes glowed with an inner light, and, when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. "Greetings, Admiral Kethmore," the being said, its words perfectly pronounced despite the obvious physical modifications to its speech apparatus. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Prometheus. You have threatened our world and our species. We're here to discuss your surrender." Kethmore's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter if not for the growing unease in his thorax. "Surrender? You bring 17 primitive vessels against the Third Fleet of the Galactic Hegemony? I have 200 ships under my command." "Correction," Captain Chen replied, her modified features showing what might have been a smile. "You had 200 ships. Our deep space reconnaissance drones have been tracking your fleet's movements since you entered our system. You now have 194 ships. 6 of your outer picket vessels suffered what your damage reports are calling catastrophic system failures, but we know better." The communication ended, and Kethmore spun to face his tactical officer. "Report. What happened to the outer picket ships?" Commander Yalera's forearms moved frantically across her controls. "Sir, I'm not showing any damage to the outer picket vessels. All ships report normal status. Communications, raise the patrol ship Voidwalker." The communications officer worked her controls, her crystalline form chiming softly. After several moments, she looked up with confusion written across her translated features. "Sir, I'm receiving their automated beacon, but no response to direct communication. Send a recovery shuttle to investigate." 20 minutes later, the shuttle pilot's voice crackled over the communication system, and the horror in his tone was universal across species. "Admiral, there's no one here. The ship is intact, all systems operational, but the crew, they're gone. All of them. There are no signs of struggle, no evidence of weapons fire. They're just gone." Admiral Kethmore felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service, genuine fear. A species didn't eliminate ship crews without leaving evidence unless they possessed technology far beyond what intelligence suggested. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Sarah Chen stood before her own tactical display, watching the hegemony fleet's confused scrambling with cold satisfaction. At her side, her tactical officer, a being who had once been Lieutenant Commander James Park before undergoing the same enhancement procedures, monitored the enemy's communications. "They're starting to panic," Park observed, his enhanced hearing picking up the subtle stress indicators and alien speech patterns. 6 ships neutralized without them even detecting our insertion teams." Chen nodded. The enhanced soldiers currently aboard those 6 hegemony vessels had been created specifically for this mission. Their bodies had been modified to survive in the vacuum of space, their skeletal structure reinforced with carbon nanotube matrices, their nervous systems enhanced with quantum processing implants that allowed them to think and react at superhuman speeds. Phase 2 is authorized, she said. Begin the hunt. Throughout the Hegemony fleet, crews began experiencing what they would later describe as their worst nightmare come to life. The first sign was always the same: environmental controls would flicker momentarily, then return to normal. Security cameras would show empty corridors for the briefest instant before their imaging systems returned to standard operation. Then, crew members would begin disappearing. Lieutenant Vexhai of the Hegemony destroyer Iron Mandate was conducting a routine patrol of the ship's lower decks when he heard something that shouldn't have been possible: footsteps in the corridor ahead. Heavy footsteps, moving with purpose, but, when he turned the corner, the corridor was empty. He activated his communication device. Security to Deck 7, Section C, possible intruder. The response came immediately. Security is already en route, Lieutenant. We lost contact with Ensign Mordak in that section 3 minutes ago. Vexhai felt his species equivalent of cold fear wash through his system. He drew his plasma sidearm and advanced cautiously down the corridor. At the intersection ahead, he found Ensign Mordak's weapon lying on the deck, still warm from recent use, but no sign of Mordak himself. Security, he whispered into his communicator, Ensign Mordak is missing. His weapon was discharged, but the lights went out. In the absolute darkness of the ship's emergency lighting system, Vexhai heard something that would haunt him for the rest of his life: breathing that wasn't quite right, as if whatever was breathing had more lung capacity than any known species. Hello, a voice said in perfect Hegemony standard, despite the fact that humans weren't supposed to know their language. Don't move. Don't call for help. Just listen. Vexhai's training told him to fight, to alert security, to do something other than stand frozen in terror. But something in that voice, something cold and predatory, convinced him that moving would be the last thing he ever did. Your admiral declared war on our species, the voice continued. He threatened our families, our children, our world. Did you know that humans are persistence hunters? We don't just kill our prey quickly, we track it until it collapses from exhaustion. Your admiral has made himself and everyone under his command into prey. What do you want? Vexhai managed to whisper. Information. Ship schematics. Command codes. Personnel rosters. The voice paused. Your admiral is going to surrender, and you're going to help us convince him. When the lights came back on, Vexhai found himself face to face with his worst nightmare. The thing that stood before him had once been human, but enhancement procedures had turned it into something else entirely. It stood nearly 9 feet tall, its body covered in what appeared to be biomechanical armor that moved like living tissue. Its eyes glowed with an inner light that suggested integrated optical enhancement systems. My name is Sergeant Martinez, the enhanced human said, extending a hand that could have crushed Vexhai's skull without effort. I'm here to explain why your species should have researched Deathworld predators before declaring war on one. Across the Hegemony fleet, similar encounters were taking place. Enhanced human infiltrators moved through alien ships like ghosts, eliminating resistance with surgical precision while gathering intelligence and spreading psychological warfare that was more effective than any conventional weapon. Admiral Kethmore received the first real report of what was happening to his fleet when Commander Yalera approached him with data that shouldn't have been possible. Sir, we've lost communication with 47 vessels. Destroyed? No, sir. Their ships are intact and operating normally. Their automated systems are responding. But their crews. She paused, her forearms trembling slightly. Sir, the crews have been taken. Taken? Taken where? Unknown. Our scouts report finding ships with all systems operational but completely devoid of crew. No signs of struggle, no evidence of weapons fire. The crew quarters look as if the occupants simply left. Kethmore stared at his tactical display, watching the blue marble of Earth slowly rotate below his diminished fleet. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an enemy that didn't fight like any other species in the galaxy. Open a communication channel to the human vessels, he ordered. Captain Chen's image appeared on his screen, her enhanced features showing what might have been amusement. Admiral. Ready to discuss terms? What have you done with my crews? He demanded. They're safe. Confused, terrified, and probably questioning their life choices, but safe. We don't kill unnecessarily, Admiral. That's the difference between a predator and a monster. Her glowing eyes fixed on his through the screen. You have 24 hours to withdraw your fleet from our system. Every hour you delay, more of your ships will experience what your crews are calling ghost attacks. How many of your people are you willing to sacrifice for your pride? The communication ended, leaving Admiral Kethmore staring at a blank screen and contemplating a truth that the galactic hegemony had never encountered before. They had declared war on a species that had spent millions of years learning to hunt in packs, and now they were the prey. Admiral Kethmore's 24 hours expired with the precision of a countdown timer. At exactly 0800 ship time, every hegemony vessel in the fleet received a simultaneous communication from the 17 human ships that had emerged from Earth's asteroid belt. "Admiral," came Captain Shen's voice, broadcast to every ship in the fleet, "your time is up. Since you've chosen to remain in our system, we'll now demonstrate why challenging a Deathworld species is inadvisable." Kethmore activated his fleet-wide communications. "All ships, battle stations. Prepare for engagement." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations, assuming anyone survived to study it. The human ships didn't attack in any conventional sense. Instead, they simply changed. The organic-looking hulls began to shift and flow, revealing weapon systems that defied every known principle of physics. Rather than energy weapons or kinetic projectiles, the human vessels deployed something far more terrifying: they deployed themselves. Commander Yalera watched her sensors in disbelief as the human ships began to literally transform. "Admiral, the enemy vessels are fragmenting." "No, not fragmenting, they're separating into smaller units." Each of the 17 human ships dissolved into hundreds of smaller craft, each no larger than a fighter but moving with impossible coordination. Within minutes, the hegemony fleet found itself surrounded by thousands of small, fast-moving targets that appeared to be operating as a single organism. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethmore ordered, but it was too late. The small human craft didn't fire weapons, they made contact with hegemony ships and began to burrow through their hulls. Within seconds, Admiral Kethmore realized with growing horror that these weren't unmanned drones. Each small craft contained an enhanced human, beings who had been modified to survive in space and fight in environments that would kill any normal life form. On the hegemony cruiser Stellar Dominion, Captain Veltar watched his bridge view screen in terror as small, human-shaped figures began cutting their way through his ship's outer hull with what appeared to be molecular disruptors built into their enhanced bodies. These weren't soldiers wearing armor, their armor was part of them, grown from their own modified tissue. "Security teams to all breach points," he ordered, but his security teams were discovering that fighting enhanced humans in close quarters was like fighting nightmares made manifest. The enhanced soldiers moved through ship corridors with fluid grace, their modified bodies allowing them to navigate in zero gravity as easily as on solid ground. Their enhanced strength let them tear through bulkhead doors as if they were paper. Their integrated weapon systems could cut through armor plating or stun targets with neural disruptors that left victims conscious but paralyzed. But it was their tactics that truly terrified the hegemony crews. These enhanced humans fought like pack hunters, coordinating their attacks with an efficiency that suggested shared consciousness. They would systematically isolate crew members, render them unconscious with minimal violence, and then move on to the next target. Sergeant Martinez, the enhanced human who had earlier confronted Lieutenant Vexai, led a team of 6 through the Stellar Dominion's command decks. His enhanced senses could track the emotional state of every crew member within 100 meters, and his integrated tactical computer was constantly updating optimal routes through the ship. Targets isolated in the bridge, he reported to his team through their neural link. "Standard capture protocol. Remember, we want prisoners, not casualties." The assault on the bridge lasted exactly 47 seconds. The hegemony bridge crew, armed with plasma weapons and protected by energy shields, found themselves facing opponents who moved faster than their targeting systems could track and who seemed to anticipate their every defensive maneuver. Captain Veltar watched his security chief, a veteran of 30 combat campaigns, get casually tossed across the bridge by a human who appeared to be using less effort than someone might use to move furniture. When he tried to activate the ship's self-destruct sequence, he found his hands wouldn't respond to his mental commands. "Neural disruptor," Sergeant Martinez explained, approaching the captain's chair with predatory calm. "Temporary paralysis of voluntary motor functions. You'll recover in a few hours." He gestured to the bridge around them, now secured by his team. "Your ship is now under human control. Your crew is safe but detained. Your weapons are offline." "This is impossible," Veltar managed to whisper. no species develops technology this advanced while remaining at primitive technological levels. Martinez's enhanced features showed what might have been sympathy. You made a fundamental error, Captain. You assumed that technological advancement and survival capability are the same thing. We didn't develop this technology, we became this technology. Across the hegemony fleet, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of ships. Enhanced humans moved through alien vessels like antibodies through an infected organism, systematically neutralizing threats and capturing crews with minimal casualties. Admiral Kethmore watched his tactical display as ship after ship reported communication difficulties before going dark. The truth was becoming clear, his fleet wasn't being destroyed, it was being captured. Sir, Commander Yelera reported, her voice tight with controlled panic, we're receiving a transmission from the Iron Mandate. It's from their bridge, but the voice is human. On the main screen, a figure that had once been entirely human but was now something more appeared. The enhanced being wore what appeared to be hegemony officer's insignia, but the uniform was clearly modified to accommodate his enlarged frame. Admiral Kethmore, the figure said in perfect hegemony standard, I am Colonel Harrison, Earth Defense Force. I'm currently standing on the bridge of one of your destroyers, which is now under our control. Your crew is safe and unharmed, but they are no longer in command of their vessel. What do you want? Kethmore demanded. To explain something your intelligence networks apparently failed to research, Harrison replied. Earth isn't just classified as a deathworld because of dangerous fauna or harsh environmental conditions. It's classified as a deathworld because everything on our planet, from microscopic organisms to apex predators, exists in a constant state of evolutionary warfare. We didn't just evolve intelligence, Admiral. We evolved the ability to become whatever we need to become to survive. The screen split, showing feeds from multiple hegemony ships now under human control. Enhanced humans stood on bridge after bridge, calmly overseeing alien crews who looked like they had encountered their worst nightmares. Your species, Harrison continued, evolved on worlds where cooperation and advanced technology allowed you to minimize conflict. You developed impressive tools, but you never had to become weapons yourselves. We've spent our entire evolutionary history as weapons, Admiral. We just learned to build tools later. Admiral Kethmore's mandibles clicked involuntarily as the scope of his tactical situation became clear. His enemy hadn't just defeated his fleet, they had absorbed it. The humans were fighting a war of conversion, turning his own vessels against him while leaving their crews alive but helpless. What are your terms? He asked, the words tasting like defeat. Simple, Harrison replied. Immediate withdrawal from this system. Return to your superiors and explain that Earth is under the protection of a species that has spent millions of years learning to hunt together. Any future aggression against our world or our allies will be met with the full military capability of the Enhanced Defense Force. Enhanced Defense Force? Harrison's modified features showed what might have been a grim smile. The volunteers who underwent biological and technological enhancement to protect our species. We are what humans become when our families are threatened. We suggest you remember that. The communication ended, leaving Admiral Kethmore staring at a tactical display that showed his fleet scattered and captured. In less than 6 hours, 200 of the hegemony's most advanced warships had been neutralized by 17 vessels crewed by beings that had once been human. On Earth's surface, General Mitchell watched the tactical feeds from the orbital battle with mixed emotions. The Enhanced Defense Force had performed exactly as projected, but she couldn't shake the knowledge of what humanity had sacrificed to achieve this victory. Ma'am, Colonel Rodriguez reported, all fleet assets secured. Enemy casualties minimal. Our casualties, 0. And the enhanced soldiers? Rodriguez hesitated. Physically, they're all operating within normal parameters. Psychologically. He trailed off. Ma'am, they're not the same people who volunteered for the procedure. The enhancements worked exactly as designed, but the subjects have developed behavioral patterns consistent with pack predators. They're loyal to humanity, but they're not human anymore. Mitchell nodded grimly. Humanity had won its first interstellar war, but the price had been to create a warrior caste that was something beyond human. The Enhanced Defense Force would protect Earth and its colonies, but they would never again be able to return to normal human society. In orbit, Admiral Kethmore composed his report to Hegemony Command with the knowledge that his career was over. He had to explain how a primitive species had not only defeated his fleet but had captured it intact using technology that seemed to merge biology and machinery in ways the hegemony had never imagined. The final line of his report would become the unofficial motto of hegemony forces: do not engage Deathworld species in close combat. They do not fight wars, they become war itself. The galaxy was about to learn that there were different kinds of intelligence in the universe, and the most dangerous kind belonged to species that had learned to evolve faster than their enemies could adapt. 3 months after the surrender of the Hegemony Third Fleet, Colonel Harrison stood in the observation deck of the captured Hegemony flagship Dominion's Edge, watching Earth slowly rotate below. The blue marble looked exactly the same as it had before the war, but everything else had changed in ways that couldn't be seen from orbit. His enhanced senses picked up the approach of another enhanced soldier before she entered the room. Captain Chen's footsteps had a distinctive rhythm, measured, precise, carrying the weight of someone whose bone density had been increased by 40% and whose muscle fibers had been replaced with synthetic alternatives. Status report, he asked without turning from the viewport. Integration of captured hegemony technology proceeding ahead of schedule, Chen replied, moving to stand beside him. Our engineering teams have successfully reverse-engineered their faster-than-light communication systems and their energy-to-matter conversion technologies. The enhanced soldiers are adapting to zero-gravity combat faster than projected. Harrison nodded. The enhanced defense force had grown from the original volunteers to nearly 50,000 soldiers, each one a former human who had undergone irreversible biological and technological modifications. They were faster, stronger, and more resilient than baseline humans, but they were also something else entirely. What about the prisoners? The hegemony crews are adapting. Most have been released to baseline human custody planetside. Admiral Kethmore and his senior staff remain in protective detention. Chen paused. They've been requesting permission to observe our enhancement procedures. This caught Harrison's attention. He turned to face his second-in-command, noting the way her enhanced vision automatically adjusted to track his movement with predatory precision. Why? Academic curiosity, they claim. Admiral Kethmore has spent considerable time studying our tactical recordings. He's developed theories about Deathworld evolution that he wants to share with his government. Harrison considered this. In the 3 months since the battle, intercepted hegemony communications had revealed that news of their defeat was causing significant upheaval throughout their empire. Dozens of member species were questioning the hegemony's military supremacy, and several frontier worlds had declared independence. Schedule a meeting, he decided. I want to hear these theories. Admiral Kethmore looked different after 3 months in human custody. His natural coloration had shifted to darker hues, a stress response common to his species, and his movements carried a nervous energy that suggested constant awareness of being surrounded by predators. Colonel Harrison, he said as the enhanced human entered the conference room aboard the Dominion's Edge. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Captain Chen tells me you have theories about Deathworld evolution, Harrison replied, settling into a chair that automatically adjusted to accommodate his enlarged frame. I'm curious to hear them. Kethmore activated a holographic display showing galactic star charts marked with various classifications. In the 3 months I've spent studying your species and observing your enhanced soldiers, I've reached conclusions that challenge fundamental assumptions about the development of intelligent life. The display zoomed in on Earth's section of the galaxy, highlighting nearby star systems in different colors. The galactic hegemony has always assumed that intelligence develops as a response to environmental challenges that can be solved through technology and cooperation. Most species, including my own, evolved on worlds where the primary threats could be overcome through tool use and social organization. But Deathworlds are different, Harrison observed. Precisely. On Deathworlds, the threats are not external problems to be solved, they are constant evolutionary pressure that shapes the very nature of the species. Your people didn't just develop intelligence to use tools. You developed intelligence to become tools. The holographic display showed comparative evolutionary charts between humans and several hegemony species. Look at these developmental patterns. My species, the Valkyrie, developed advanced mathematics and engineering because we needed to build structures that could withstand our planet's seasonal storms. The crystalline Chukhai developed sophisticated chemistry because they needed to process the mineral content in their atmospheric composition. And humans? Humans developed warfare, Kethmore said simply. Not as a social aberration or an unfortunate necessity, but as a fundamental evolutionary strategy. Your species learned to cooperate not despite being predators, but because being pack predators was more effective than being solitary ones. Harrison studied the evolutionary comparisons with interest. His enhanced cognitive processing allowed him to absorb the information faster than a baseline human could have managed, but the conclusions were still startling. The enhancement procedures you've undergone, Kethmore continued, they're not really technology in the sense that other species understand it. They're directed evolution. You've weaponized your own adaptability. And this troubles you? Kethmore's mandibles clicked in. What Harrison had learned was his species' expression of deep unease. Colonel, in my 40 years of military service, I've encountered over 300 different species across 67 worlds. I've seen beings that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, species that existed as pure energy, civilizations that had transcended physical form entirely. He paused, his alien features showing something that might have been fear. But I've never encountered a species that could fundamentally alter its own nature in real time while maintaining its essential identity. Your enhanced soldiers are still recognizably human in their loyalty, their tactics, their social structures. But they're also something entirely new. It's as if your species has learned to evolve faster than natural selection typically allows. Captain Chen, who had been observing silently, spoke for the first time. Admiral, are you saying that you believe humans represent some kind of evolutionary threat to the galaxy? I'm saying, Kethmore replied carefully, that I believe humans represent the next stage of intelligent life. The hegemony has spent 3,000 years bringing order to the galaxy by incorporating species that follow predictable developmental patterns. But humans don't follow those patterns. He manipulated the holographic display to show star charts extending beyond known space. There are approximately 400 billion star systems in this galaxy. Current estimates suggest that fewer than 1% contain worlds classified as true Deathworlds. Of those, perhaps 1 in 1,000 might develop intelligent life. And, of those, the statistical probability of that intelligent life developing both cooperative social structures and directed evolutionary capability is essentially zero. But humans did it anyway, Harrison said. Exactly. Your species represents a statistical impossibility that happened anyway. And, now that it has happened, the implications for galactic civilization are. He trailed off, searching for words in a language that didn't have adequate concepts for what he was trying to express. Terrifying? Chen suggested. Revolutionary, Kethmore corrected. Your enhanced soldiers aren't just superior warriors. They're proof that intelligence can be deliberately directed to overcome any environmental challenge. You've essentially solved the fundamental limitation that keeps most species confined to their home systems. Harrison leaned forward in his chair. Explain. Most species, including the hegemony races, are fundamentally limited by the biology that evolved to survive on their home worlds. We can develop technology to overcome these limitations, but we can't change our essential nature. A Valkyrie will always require certain atmospheric conditions. A Chuck-High will always need specific mineral supplements. Our biology defines the boundaries of where we can live and how we can live. But humans can change their biology. More than that, you can change your biology while maintaining your cultural and intellectual identity. An enhanced human like yourself is still recognizably human in thought and motivation, but your physical capabilities can be adapted to survive in any environment. You've broken the evolutionary lock that keeps most species tied to worlds similar to their homeworld. The implications of this observation settled over the room like a heavy weight. Harrison realized that Admiral Kethmore was describing more than just military superiority. He was describing a form of existence that could potentially spread across the galaxy without the usual constraints that limited other species. What recommendations will you make to your government? Harrison asked. Kethmore was quiet for several long moments. I will recommend immediate diplomatic contact with Earth's government. I will suggest that the hegemony offer full membership status to humanity, with all the rights and protections that implies. And I will strongly advise against any future military action against human-controlled worlds. Because you're afraid of us? Because I'm afraid for us, Kethmore corrected. Colonel, your species has been isolated on one world for its entire existence, and, in 3 months you've managed to capture an entire hegemony fleet and reverse engineer technology that took us centuries to develop. What will you be capable of in a year? In a decade? Harrison stood and moved back to the viewport, looking down at Earth with enhanced vision that could pick out individual cities on the nighttime side of the planet. Down there, enhancement facilities were working around the clock to create more soldiers like him. Research stations were developing new technologies based on captured hegemony science. And baseline humans were living their daily lives, unaware that their species had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. "We'll be whatever we need to be, Admiral," he said quietly. "That's what Deathworld species do, we adapt." Behind him, Admiral Kethmore felt something that might have been prescience, a sudden certainty that he was witnessing the moment when the galaxy began to change in ways that no one could predict or control. The humans had won their first interstellar war, but Harrison's simple statement suggested that it wouldn't be their last. The Enhanced Defense Force had been created to protect one world, but Admiral Kethmore was beginning to suspect that protection might soon extend far beyond Earth's solar system. 1 year after the defeat of the Hegemony Third Fleet, the galactic political landscape had transformed in ways that no one had predicted. Admiral Kethmore stood in the chambers of the Galactic Senate on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, preparing to deliver a report that would fundamentally alter how the galaxy viewed humanity and Deathworld species. The Senate chambers were a magnificent structure designed to accommodate the galaxy's most influential species. Representatives from over 200 worlds sat in curved tiers that rose toward a crystalline dome, each delegation positioned according to their government's relative power and influence. For the first time in galactic history, humans occupied seats in the high-priority section normally reserved for major civilizations. But the human delegation was unlike any other that had ever appeared before the Galactic Senate. Colonel Harrison, now bearing the title of Earth's first ambassador to the galactic community, sat with perfect stillness that spoke of enhanced reflexes and absolute confidence. Beside him, Captain Chen represented the Enhanced Defense Force's growing diplomatic corps. Both wore formal uniforms that had been specially designed to accommodate their modified physiology, and both radiated a presence that made other delegates unconsciously adjust their seating positions. Kethmore had spent the past year traveling throughout hegemony space, documenting the cascading effects of humanity's emergence as a galactic power. The results of his investigation had shaken the foundations of everything the galaxy thought it knew about the development of intelligent species. "Honored delegates," Kethmore began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustically perfect design, "I stand before you today to present findings that challenge our fundamental understanding of evolution, intelligence, and the future of galactic civilization." The holographic display that materialized above the chamber floor showed detailed charts and analyses that Kethmore had compiled with the assistance of human scientists. The collaboration itself had been a revelation. Human researchers processed information and developed hypotheses at rates that often surpassed their alien colleagues, despite having access to galactic databases for less than a year. 12 months ago, humanity was unknown beyond their home system. Today, they represent what may be the most significant evolutionary development in galactic history. The display showed comparative analyses between human enhancement procedures and the biological limitations of established galactic species. The Enhanced Defense Force, Kethmore continued, has grown to over 200,000 soldiers, each one representing a successful fusion of biological adaptation and technological integration that was previously thought to be impossible. Senator Velazar of the Crystalline Collective raised a resonant appendage. "Admiral, are you suggesting that human enhancement represents a threat to existing galactic order?" Kethmore's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Senator, I'm suggesting that human enhancement represents the evolution of galactic order. In the past year, 18 frontier worlds have requested human assistance with various crises that their own governments could not address. In every case, enhanced human advisors and soldiers have successfully resolved conflicts that had persisted for decades." The display showed star charts marking recent human interventions. The Thekkai mining crisis, where enhanced humans had successfully negotiated peace between warring factions while simultaneously developing new extraction technologies. The Velmort plague, where human medical researchers had developed treatments by directly modifying their own biology to test potential cures. The Frontier Pirate Suppression Campaign, where a single enhanced human company had eliminated raider fleets that had been terrorizing trade routes for years. More significantly, Kethmore continued, human colonies are now being established on worlds previously considered uninhabitable by any known species. Enhanced humans can adapt to environmental conditions that would kill any other form of intelligent life. Ambassador Harrison rose from his seat, his enhanced frame carrying him to the speaking podium with fluid grace. The chamber fell silent as delegates found themselves face to face with a being that represented an entirely new category of existence. "Honored delegates," Harrison said, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that suggested vocal modifications, "I want to address the concerns that many of you have expressed about human expansion and the Enhanced Defense Force." He gestured, and the holographic display changed to show detailed schematics of human enhancement procedures. The technology that created soldiers like myself is not a weapon of conquest. It is a tool of survival developed by a species that spent its entire evolutionary history learning to adapt to impossible conditions. Senator Mordain of the Hegemony Core Worlds leaned forward. Ambassador, your species has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed anything in our databases. How can the galaxy be certain that human expansion will remain peaceful? Harrison's enhanced features showed what might have been a smile, though the expression carried undertones that most species found difficult to interpret. Senator, I think you're asking the wrong question. The real question isn't whether human expansion will remain peaceful. The real question is whether the galaxy is ready to evolve beyond the limitations that have confined intelligent species to a handful of worlds each. The display showed projections of galactic development under different scenarios. Traditional expansion patterns, limited by species' biological requirements for specific environmental conditions, showed slow growth constrained by the availability of suitable worlds. Human expansion patterns, unconstrained by fixed biological requirements, showed exponential growth limited only by available resources and energy. The Enhanced Defense Force, Harrison continued, represents proof that intelligence can consciously direct its own evolution. We are not bound by the biology that evolved on our homeworld. We can become whatever we need to become to survive and thrive in any environment. He paused, allowing the implications of this statement to settle over the chamber. More importantly, we can teach these techniques to other species who are willing to undergo the necessary modifications. This announcement created an immediate sensation in the chamber. Delegates began urgent consultations with their advisors, while others activated rapid communication links to their home governments. Captain Chen rose to join Harrison at the podium. Over the past 6 months, she said, volunteer subjects from 12 different species have successfully undergone modified enhancement procedures. The technology is not specifically human, it is universal. Any intelligent species can be enhanced to overcome their evolutionary limitations. The holographic display showed successful enhancement procedures performed on volunteers from various galactic civilizations. A Hegemony Valkyrie soldier now capable of surviving in environments that would have been instantly lethal to his unmodified physiology. A crystalline collective researcher whose cognitive processing had been enhanced to rival human scientists. A frontier trader whose enhanced endurance allowed him to operate in extreme environments without life support. The future of galactic civilization, Chen continued, is not about one species dominating others. It is about all species transcending the limitations that evolution placed on their ancestors. Admiral Kethmore returned to the podium for his final observations. Honored delegates, I have spent the past year documenting the most significant development in galactic history. Humanity has not simply introduced new technology or superior weapons. They have introduced the concept of directed evolution, the ability for intelligent species to consciously control their own biological development. The implications extend far beyond military applications. Enhanced beings can colonize worlds that were previously uninhabitable. They can survive environmental disasters that would eliminate entire populations. They can adapt to challenges that haven't been discovered yet. He gestured toward the human delegation. These beings represent the future of intelligence in our galaxy. The question before us is not whether we will accept human expansion, that expansion is already occurring and cannot be stopped by conventional means. The question is whether we will evolve alongside them or remain confined to the limitations our ancestors accepted as permanent. The vote that followed would be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization chose its future direction. By an overwhelming majority, the Galactic Senate voted to establish the Enhanced Species Initiative, a galaxy-wide program offering voluntary enhancement procedures to any species willing to undergo the necessary modifications. Ambassador Harrison watched the voting results with satisfaction, but also with a deep awareness of what humanity had unleashed upon the galaxy. The Enhanced Defense Force had begun as a desperate measure to protect one world from invasion. It had become the catalyst for the next stage of intelligent evolution. In the months that followed, enhancement facilities would be established on hundreds of worlds. New colonies would be founded on planets that had been considered impossible to inhabit. Old limitations would be discarded as species learned to become whatever they needed to become to thrive in an expanding universe. The galaxy had learned the ultimate lesson that Deathworld species had to offer: survival wasn't about accepting limitations, it was about evolving beyond them. And, in the deep reaches of space, beyond the current boundaries of known civilization, enhanced human scouts were already discovering that the galaxy contained challenges that even Deathworld evolution hadn't prepared them for. But, they would adapt, as they always had. They would become whatever they needed to become. Because that's what humans did. And, now, it's what the entire galaxy would learn to do.